glad that miracles have happened and that he's been able to be here today and walk here and be able to share his experience and some words of wisdom with us. Please join me in welcoming Chris Washburn.
Thank you so much. What an honor to come back. I so appreciate this. I was joking that they probably, the first 5 people that they asked declined, and so then they said, well, let's give to Chris. And so I appreciate this honor. It's wonderful to come back to BYU again. It's true, I got a lot of degrees from here. I was talking earlier that I had actually planned to do a double major in Japanese and English, but I was 1 class short and they didn't offer it in the winter semester. And I had already been accepted into law school, and so I was 1 class short. Maybe somehow I'll figure out how to do that class later. But what's funny is, even after I had graduated, I kept getting emails and letters from BYU saying, you need to register again. I guess they thought I was such a familiar sight around here. And I kept thinking, what other degrees do you have that I can get? I guess now there's a medical school coming in, so maybe I'll do that. But I wanted to take a second, and I hope that I can. I really appreciate the students that are here and the faculty and many of those others. I want to just talk for a moment about my humanities degree and how it has helped me in my life, and then just tell you a little bit of my story. But I want to start first with a particular story. This is an old kind of a parable story out of Asia, and it is about, the story goes, there was a man running from a tiger. You can see it right here. And you can imagine the fear that you have as you're being chased by this. Well, he ends up in this predicament. He's hanging from a vine. Not only now is there 1 tiger, but there's a 2nd tiger below him. And to make matters worse, there are a couple of mice up there chewing on the vine that he's hanging from. Have any of you ever found yourself in a position like this? Not necessarily literally, but symbolically, where you feel like you've got tigers on both sides, you've got something eating the only thing that you're hanging on to, and you're trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Well, what this man did, funny enough, is he saw a strawberry right in front of him. And he plucked it out, and he took a bite of the strawberry, and the line from this story is, the strawberry was sweet. And you think, okay, that's great. Did he get eaten by the tigers, or what happened after that? And we don't know. We don't know. I love, that's a beautiful part about this little story, is the symbolism is the strawberry was sweet. And that's what I want to talk about today for just a moment, about being in the moment. There are so many times in our lives where we have the tigers, we have the mice, we have everything else around us, and we're confused, there's fear, getting into our hearts, and we don't realize the beauties and the joys right in front of us. In Japanese, I was taught that there is a beautiful phrase called mono no aware, and this is an old phrase, but in the Japanese culture, it's one of the things that I loved about my Japanese education, was they appreciate so much things in the moment, things that are right there, the awe of the now. And it's captured by, say, a sunset, which you see the beauty for a moment and then it's gone. Or cherry blossoms, where they have annual cherry blossom festivals that they go out and watch the cherry blossoms. There are many other things, if you think about in life, that are just beautiful moments, and they only last for a moment. And how do you capture that in life when we have all of those other scary things or trials or whatever? How do you find the joy in the journey? And that's what I want to talk with you about a little bit today. But before I do that, I want to just take a second and tell you a little bit more about myself and what I had done. So, talking about BYU to begin with, and it just hit me again, and I'm sorry, I'm quite emotional from these last 8 months because a lot has changed for me with this accident that I went through. But the fact that we could start a lecture here with an opening prayer, and to be able to intertwine the Spirit and gospel teachings in lectures is just amazing to me. You can get a humanities degree from many other universities, but you cannot get a humanities degree the way it is taught here. And I think that is the most profound thing about BYU, that we are able to look, we seek learning from the best books, and we seek learning from study, but we also get it from faith, from our education there. And that is one of the things that has propelled me through my life, and I'm so grateful for that education. In Japanese in particular, what I loved, and when you learn a language, it could be English, it could be any number of languages, it opens your eyes to the way people think and the way they speak and what they do. And I have got to be such a lover of language learning, even in the age of AI where you think, well, what's the point? They can put something in my ear and I can translate it. But you don't really get to understand how a person thinks. And so I've kind of had a little hobby now where I'm also learning Chinese and German and French and Spanish, because I have a little Spanish-speaking grandson, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to speak with him unless I learn Spanish. But all of these, it's amazing how every one of those languages, they all have a different way of communicating the same thing. I mean, you look at the beautiful language of Japanese, which I'm partial to, and the way things are said, there's often spaces between the words. And there are things that are said there that are not captured in the words, and it's the feelings. Contrast that with Chinese, which is just like boom, boom, boom. And it's all there, and it's very direct, and you're all just like, whoa, I'm surprised that they said that. But it kind of captures the differences of how you communicate, and I love that. There is, in your humanities degree, there are things that cannot be captured by AI. It's the feelings, the looking through others' eyes, the ability to understand differently the nuances that are not, well, I don't see how they'll ever be captured by AI. And I'm so grateful for that education, and I hope you guys realize how important it is to have this as a foundation. For me, the humanities was my foundation. It was the heart that opened my life up to be able to see, to relate to other people. And then I kind of, on my personal tree, I layered on there, an MBA and a law degree, which were more theoretical. They're more, using my mind. But those two together gave me so much balance, between a law degree and an MBA on one hand and my humanities degree on the other, between heart and mind. And I'm so grateful for that. So I was looking back for pictures. Apparently we didn't really take very many pictures. That was the only other guy in the right-hand picture that graduated with a JD MBA with me. It was a very small group of us. And then my mom found a picture of me with my eyes half closed, sitting in a group of people there for my undergraduate degree, but that was that. I'm going to show you a second a little bit about my career. It was not a career path, as I think of it, as more of a journey of curiosity. One of the great things that the BYU education taught me, and I found that the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know. But it was a way of learning how to learn. And I think one of the greatest blessings was that spirit of curiosity, just wanting to learn about things above the earth and beneath the earth and on the earth and in diverse places, as it talks about in the Doctrine and Covenants. It's just a wonder that we can have places that we can learn some of those. So, once I graduated from graduate school, I hauled my little family down. This picture shows a daughter there too, but she was born down in California. What I really had was just two little boys, my wife, and we hauled ourselves down to California. We joined Nissan Motor Corporation. And it looks cool with the sunset beaches and everything. We had a wonderful time there. I think I had hoped I'd joined a Japanese company, an international company, and I thought this is going to be my place to use my Japanese and to be able to get into international business. What happened for me was, this was the American side of the company in Southern California, and they said, oh, this is wonderful, we got a guy here that can speak Japanese. Don't tell anybody that you speak Japanese. Because when the Japanese business side comes over, we want to use you as a spy. And so I had myself at one time in a very, a meeting that was far above my pay grade. And they just had me sitting there. And it was the VPs and the CEOs of the American side presenting a plan costing hundreds of millions of dollars to the chairman and the CEO of this Japanese side. And I'm just supposed to sit there and listen. So they did the whole presentation in English. And then the Japanese side just started talking among themselves in Japanese. And this is apparently where I was supposed to listen. And and as I was listening to them, they started saying, well, this is kind of interesting. They're asking for a ton of money. I don't really know if I believe these guys that they can do this. It's just too bad that we don't have any kind of evidence that supports this, because, I mean, I'm really tempted to just say thank you very much and let's just walk back and we'll just say we'll consider it, which is basically no. And at that point, I was just listening along, and I jumped in English, and I said, as it just so happens, there is some data that we have, and I pulled out the only piece of thing that I had, and I started explaining them a little bit of this. And I can remember my bosses, the Americans on that side, they were looking at me like going, why are you even talking? And then the Japanese, they were looking going, either this guy has impeccable timing, or he's understood exactly what we've been saying. And I quietly had to just butt my lip. But the good news is the deal went through, and I don't think that would have happened otherwise. So it was a lot of fun. What happened for me though next, I got a call from somebody, and he said, would you like to come and speak to a guy named Lee Iacocca? Now, a lot of you don't know who Lee Iacocca is, but today that would be like getting a call from somebody saying, would you like to speak to Jeff Bezos? And it's something that you say, absolutely, I'll talk to him. So I found myself sitting across the desk from Lee Iacocca in Southern California. And he was starting a new company, an electric mobility company. And he said, I'd like you to come join me. And at that moment I thought, well, I've got a career path on this side, and I can see the next 30 years exactly where I'll go. Or this side, I don't know, this sounds exciting. I mean, I could fall flat on my face, or we could keep moving, but so I found myself joining his company. And it was a company where we started making e-bikes, if you can believe it. In fact, we trademarked the term e-bike. It was cool before e-bikes were even ready. You see them now everywhere, but back at that time, people were saying, e-bike? Why would you want an e-bike? Aren't bikes meant for exercise? And that's kind of, how we went about selling these things. I worked for him for a number of years, and there are several stories I could tell in this one, but I want to share one in particular. I had made my way up to become president of his company, but he needed to have, as any company has, they needed more capital. And they were looking outside for more capital. And he had a group come in, and they were wanting to invest a lot of money into the company. And Lee was saying, I want you to read through all these documents. And that was the night before. And as I got there in the meeting that morning of, I tried to grab him on the side and I said, I think there are a lot of concerns in this. If you read through these documents, this is not what they're representing. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking because listen, don't worry about it. We've got the meeting. We have to just go to the meeting. I think it's really good. Let's just move forward. And I said, okay. So they just came in and they started acting like the deal was done, and they were announcing it to all of their employees. They had about 200 employees in there. And Lee is shaking his head, and they were gonna close the deal. And I had to kind of jump up at a point, and I just asked a couple of questions, and they were probably too direct. But I felt an obligation to Lee and to the company about making sure that our due diligence was done. Well, next thing you know, the room was cleared. This person cleared the room, and all that were left were a few executives and us, meaning Lee, me, and two other men, a CFO and a VP of our engineering. And this man proceeded at that point to just tear into me like I've never been teared into in my life. He used words that I'd never even heard before. And I was getting ready to just stand up and walk out. But to my right, the VP of engineering just pushed down on my leg and he said, and he didn't say anything, but he just wouldn't let me leave. And I just took it, and I took it. And listened, till all of a sudden, it's just finally like he exhausted himself. And then he stopped, and I go, are you finished? And he said, yeah. And I said, I don't know that that language is appropriate here, and I don't, and he just looked at me kind of strangely and didn't know how to respond. And we got up, 4 of us, and we left the meeting. And as we were walking out into the outside, Lee turned to me and he said, what did you think of that meeting? And I said, I turned to him and I was probably heated. And I said, you could not pay me enough money to work with that person. And he said, okay, I get it. Sounds good, but we gotta, we'll proceed. And he walked back in. I called my wife on the phone and I said, I think I just quit my job. And I'm gonna be coming home. And she's like, what? You just quit your job? That doesn't, we need the money. And I said, yeah, well, I was going back to the office and I was kind of cleaning things up and I got a call from Lee. And he said, can you come to my home in Bel Air? And I thought, just fire me over the phone. I really don't want to have to go there in person to do it, but I went there. And he said, do you know what I said to that man when I walked back in? I said, no, what? And he said, I walked back in and I said, how dare you talk to one of my people like that? And especially this young man, because he's a Mormon. And he said, he doesn't talk like that. In fact, he doesn't drink, all he eats is ice cream. I was like, anyway, so he said, so now we're in a predicament. And he says, so, and I go, yeah, sounds like we are. And he says, so, I'm going to move forward with you. And I hadn't become president at that point, but he said, you are now my president of the company. And we rolled forward. And it was interesting as I looked at that. And it's one of the things that I wanted to tie into this is when you are in the moment, when you feel like there is no other place to turn, be true to your values. Be true to who you are. And remember what you represent. And the Lord comes through in those times. I have seen it over and over in my life. Well, we ended up selling that company. I helped him sell the company. One of the people, or one of the companies that was thinking of buying it, they didn't really want to buy the company, they wanted to get the employees out of it. After I had helped him sell the company, I joined another one back east. And that guy in the upper left-hand corner, it was really cool, I got a picture of him. He was a 4-star general, Wesley Clark. And I didn't know how to, I'd never worked with a military general before. I didn't know if I was supposed to salute or bow or what do you do. But he was such a wonderful man to work with. And we were doing another type of electric bike, selling it to the military. And this, if you're in business and selling a product, this was a fun company because we would sell the product and a lot of the military, it'd be like Secret Service or Secret Forces or whatever, Special Forces. They'd use the product and then blow it up. And so there's no warranty, no anything on it. It's fantastic. The problem was, that map on the lower right, that's an exact replica of how I was traveling. I was going 50 weeks out of the year I was traveling. So I was having wonderful career moments, but I was missing life moments. I was missing the time that I had a piano recital or a soccer game or just being with the family. This was back before you had FaceTime or anything like that. We would do everything we could to have a family night over just a phone call together. It was very tough. Well, I did this and I loved it. The pay was wonderful. But there was one time that I was walking across the threshold of a plane and I just said, I can't do this anymore. I am missing these life moments. And I quit my job. And I called my wife this time. I said, hey, I really did quit my job. She said, what? I like having you around, but we do need a job. We got to pay the bills. And so I went and took a leap of faith. And this is one of those times where if any of you have ever tried to start something on your own, it is overwhelming. I had thought, hey, great, I'm going to be around my family a lot more. What I didn't realize was I can choose my own schedule, but when you're working 12 to 15-hour days, I guess you get to choose what your 12 to 15-hour days that you're working is. But that's what I did. I was looking back for an old picture of these times, and if you can believe it, I found a picture of me. When I first started this company, this is me. And I had, if you wanted, I was going to start a bicycle company. And so that means you got to design a bicycle. You then have got to figure out how to get the bicycle built. You've got to write an owner's manual. You've got to take photos. You've got to do marketing. You've got to write, text. You've got to build a website. And guess who did all of that in the beginning? Me. It was a very difficult thing, but it was a lot of fun. And so we started the company, and it was, and I found, by the way, that it is very difficult to build something on your own. And the only way that you can really grow something is to work with people. And so this was, by the way, this is a real picture of the first bike that we ever brought in. And my little son there looking at it, we were so excited. I'm going to tell you just a little story about this. When I thought that I was going to start a company, I said, all right, first thing you got to do, I've been to business school, I know exactly how to do this. I got to write a business plan. So I wrote a business plan and spelled the whole thing out and started pitching it to different people. Lo and behold, people were interested. It actually shocked me more than anything that they were interested in my idea. And I had one person in particular that was willing to give me a lot of money. And I kept thinking, that's incredible. All I did was write a little plan, and he's willing to give me all of this money to start this. This is a no-brainer. I should just take the money and go. I mean, I'll go write another business plan if it goes bad, or whatever, is the thought process. Well, what happened was, I was walking to sign the deal across the parking lot. And my wife called me and said, how do you feel about this? And I said, funny enough, I don't feel that good about this for some reason. And she said, follow your gut. And so I walked in and shook hands and told him thank you very much. And we ended up walking away from the deal. So how did we start the company? For us, we ended up mortgaging our house, using all of our savings, everything to build it. It was completely against rational thought, but it was just following the promptings that we had at the time and really focusing on what did the Lord want us to do at that moment. I'm not saying taking money is a bad thing. By the way, it's a great thing if you can do it, but just for whatever reason at that time, it was something that the Lord wanted us to do. So we started building the company step by step. And I love this. We use a lot of little phrases, metaphors in our company. How do you get to the top of a mountain? If you just sit and stare at it for a long period of time, you'll psych yourself out. How you get to the top of a mountain is one pedal stroke at a time. You break things down into little goals. You talk about, okay, if I can just get to that next hill, and then I'll work it out from there. And then once I can get to the next hill, we'll figure it out from there. And that's how you get anything in life, is break them down into bite-sized pieces. Well, one of the other things that happened, Fazari has been around for 20 years. But here about a year and a half ago, about 2 years ago, we were getting ready for a lot of international expansion. And as we were looking at that, we started to say, what are we going to do with names, and how do we simplify this and make this as clean as possible? And one of the things that we did was we realized we need to just simplify our name. And if any of you guys have been through a rebrand, that is one of the toughest things you'll ever do. It is, you have to think about your current customers, you have to think about your future customers, and you have to tell the message, the story in between those. And, but we kept feeling this was important for us. Interestingly enough, when we even had built the name Fazari, it's a constructed name, it was combined together, but one of those parts, Ari, has always resonated with me because it ties back into a verb in the Japanese language, which it just means to be or to exist. And I love that because it tied into the core message that we were trying to do, is to exist or be in the moment. Well, as we looked at it, by the way, these are some other names of, I thought, oh, that's cool. I really like Ant in particular because we're always the small guys that are trying to fight the Goliaths anywhere. But that's what we did, to just create a message that was clean and clear. And funny enough, our Create Exceptional Experiences, which is our mission statement, really only gets back to the golden rule. That's all we're trying to do is treat others as we would want to be treated. And so a lot of these awards and things that have happened have not been because of me at all. It's because of the team that we have and how they've built this up. And I'm so grateful for that. It's been a lot of fun. Now, what I really do want to talk about next, though, is the purpose. Why we're here. Because I know you don't want to just hear my boring story. But I want to talk for a moment here about another Japanese phrase that I love a lot. And it's called Ichigo Ichie. And it means one time, one moment, or one meeting. And in that, it was expressed in an old tea ceremony, is where they came about. And I want you to just think about this for a moment. What we are experiencing here right now, it will never happen again just like this. Yes, you will be in another meeting, potentially in this room. You'll see another lecture, but it will never be exactly like this. I meet somebody right now and shake their hands and meet with them. It will never, ever be the same. There is an importance, it is important for us to treasure each of those moments because it won't happen again. And if you can find joy in those moments, you will become far more productive in your life and far more grateful for the things that you have. So I have created this thing called the Circle of Presence. And it could be anything, but for me, this really helps out just how you can get into a state of being in the moment. The first part I want to talk about is just the focus. If you can, we live in a world of distractions, and you cannot multitask your way to success. I am convinced of that. I've tried it. And by the way, a lot of these things I have not mastered, but I know that when I do them, I am a much more productive and better person. The second one is minimizing distractions. And how many of you, I've got a question for you right now. How many of you today pulled out your phone for no reason, just to look at it? Yeah, we're addicted to those in ways where you don't really have a reason. You're just like, oh, there's something I got to do. I just got to pull this out. And what happens is you are now taking yourself away from that present moment where you're at right now. You're in a different place. In Japan, you guys, how many have heard of the 3 monkeys? Raise your hands if you heard this. This is now a worldwide phenomenon. Do you know it originated in Japan hundreds of years ago in the temple shrine there? What's really kind of interesting about this, my wife showed me this. I didn't realize there's a fourth monkey. And that is the fourth monkey that exists right now. So we want to be present in those moments that we have. The next one is solitude for me. It's finding moments to be alone, to be able to ponder, to think, to turn off the distractions that are all around you. My wife and I, and I'll talk about my accident in just a moment a little bit more, but one of our favorite things to do is, and hopefully we'll be able to get back there, again, but we love to ride our mountain bikes on the front side of Timpanogos. And there is a cliff that we climb up to that is really high, and we, in the mornings, we'll sit on the cliff edge and we'll look down, and it just so happens that we can see our business from that place. We can see our house. We can see several of our kids' houses and a lot of those things. But why I love that place so much is because as I look down at my business, it appears this big. And our house is over here. All of the things that consume me in a day are really very small. And so you gain perspective when you find yourself in solitude, those quiet moments. We all know the story of, people would rather be shocked than sitting in a room alone. They'll push a button and they'll shock themselves rather than staying in the room alone and not just being alone with their thoughts. It's a lost art. Another thing that I have found that is extremely important, when you get into this mindset, you're grateful for the things that you have. And you have to have that gratitude. If you look too far into the past, you'll get into the woulda, coulda, shoulda. And you start kind of saying, how did I get here? This is not cool. This is not good. Or you go too far into the future, then you're not appreciating the moment that you're at right now. All of this, if you can get into this mindset, I believe will lead you to a step of service. And service, ironically then, is the outward looking, the way to look to help others, and to be in a space where you can actually give of your light to somebody else. This particular one here, I'm so grateful. Professor Watabe is here, and he was one of my Japanese professors. But I don't know of anybody that is more service-oriented than him. I'm lucky enough to serve on a board for a Japanese school whose sole purpose is to help young Japanese people learn English better so they can get into church-accredited schools and be able to strengthen their testimonies and be able to continue to share the light that is within. Well, I'm going to talk a minute about a curveball that hit me. But before I do that, I want to stack it up for a second. Look at these little pottery things here. Which of the ones do you think is the most valuable? You've got a beautiful, clean one up at the top that is what you would want to see in a cupboard, right? You don't want to have a broken piece down to the left that's been glued, or the one on the right that doesn't even look like somebody really put it together well at all, and it's got cracked pieces and they tried to glue it back together. Ironically, the most valuable one here is the one on the far right, the lower right. The one that has been pieced together because it talks about experience and it shows what they have had. So there is another phrase in Japanese called wabi-sabi. And I want you to read through this for just a moment, because what this says is we become better through our trials, through the struggles that we have, the things that we can learn. The teacup becomes more valuable because of the cracks. And so I thought this is very interesting. Did you think about this? The resurrected Christ decided to retain the scars in his hands and wrists as a symbol of it. And he was a perfect being. But I thought, what a beautiful representation of wabi-sabi also. Well, 8 months ago, my wife and I were invited to go down to Costa Rica and go mountain biking. And it was beautiful. We were doing things like this, riding in the jungles, and everything was absolutely wonderful. Life felt perfect. It was over my wife's birthday. Happened to be also a time when it was Valentine's Day and our anniversary. And we had biked for 2 days. And the third day we were just going to go sightseeing. But one of the friends down there said, hey, could you come just for one more ride in the morning? And we want you to just there's a guy that wants to be sponsored. And he's a pro rider. I'd love for you to just meet him. And I said, okay, let's go. This is where you would hear that music. Dun, dun, dun. And so I went biking. And unfortunately, it was a brand new trail. Wasn't very well made. And I just wasn't thinking. I came around a corner and there was a huge gap jump, and I missed it. And I ended up exactly like this. And when I came to, I could not move anything beneath my chin. I was completely paralyzed. And so I don't have time here today to talk about any of the miracles that happened, of just the miracle of getting me out of the jungle, or the miracle of getting me out of Costa Rica and back up here to be able to even get a surgery done, or the miracles I was told that really I would, it was not a good chance at all that I'd ever be able to walk again, and certainly not be able to ride a bike again, because balance is still an issue. I'm a faithful member of the church, but I don't know that I could pass a sobriety test if I was walking right now. I kind of have a little bit of a zig and zag. My wife sits behind me and she kind of tapped me like this. I think she thinks like a toy game or something as we walk along. But I found joy in the moments. It was the only thing. If I went too far back on this one into the woulda, coulda, shouldas, it will torture me. And if I think about my journey ahead of how far I have, it was too hard. But this is even me in the hospital where I could not even walk on my own. I would collapse. But I'm so grateful for those small victories. In those darkest moments, and I want to share this with you, there were two gifts that I received. And one was the gift of gratitude. I was grateful to just be alive. And I've always looked at this as, I was at a point where I couldn't move anything beneath my chin, so whatever I'm getting back is a gift. And I'm so grateful for that. The second one is the gift of love. They had a rough time getting my pain under control. No medications would really work. And in a very special time, I was awash in the feeling of love. And my pain had gone away for a certain period of time. I think as you're in those moments, if you choose, you can accept some of those gifts and allow His light to come back through in the cracks in our lives, and He can make us more beautiful than we were before, even in our current state. So what are the lessons? One of the first ones that I want to talk about is being in the moment doesn't mean, it's not this thing of, oh, just enjoy the moment, eat, drink, and be merry, because we die tomorrow. That is not it at all. It is being fully present in where you are at and what you're doing today. The second one is, if you can walk your path with purpose, every path that you're on will become holy ground. I am convinced that it doesn't matter so much what the trial is in front of us, it's how we respond to those trials in our lives, of how we're blessed. Also in those moments, the be still and know that I am God, that is where you will find our Heavenly Father and our Savior, is in those quiet moments. And finally, I love this because it ties back into some of these little messages that I've shared from Japanese literature. This was from Jacob. It's such a beautiful phrase. Our lives passed as it were a dream. And all of your lives, you are at the beginning of your lives. So many of you students here. And you have a huge road ahead of you. You can choose to be present and to accept each of those moments and to be fully engaged at the steps, or the life will just pass by as it were a dream and look back with regrets. We all will have regrets at different things, but you will have much more perspective when you are fully embracing the moment. Well, I started this with a story about strawberries. And I hope that any lesson that you can take from this again is with the strawberries. Remember, we all will have the tigers. We'll all have the mice. We all will be running from something. Fear can encompass us at any stage of our lives. But you can choose to find those places of joy, those places that are fleeting, the sunsets, the beautiful cherry blossoms, the exchange with a loved one. All of those are things that put you fully in the present. And so my challenge to all of you is look for those things in your life where you can taste the sweetness of a strawberry. Thank you, guys. I know we have a couple minutes. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? If not, thank you again for coming, and I really appreciate it. Also, I do have a little gift for all of you that are here. I have a little keychain on it that says, "Be in the moment." And you are welcome to receive those when you leave. I don't know where they're at. You got a question?
I have a question, yeah. Just as like a student, always figuring out whatever. Sometimes I feel like what I'm choosing for my undergrad is going to determine my whole life, or if I decide to go to get an MBA or law. But like when I hear lectures like this, it's like, it kind of feels like that could all happen, and then my career was totally whatever it was. How do you feel like, you reckon, like it sounded like humanities was like the perfect thing for you, even though maybe a lot of people here might say like, that's not going to get you whatever you want to go to. So I don't know. How did you think about that? How do you look at it now?
That is a very good question. And yeah, you look at my background, and even that, I don't practice law,
Right.
and or any of those things. I mean, I did for a while. I think the biggest thing that you can take, if I was at your stage again, is you have to learn how to love learning. You have to develop a curiosity, because the world will change so quickly. I mean, here just a few years ago, they said, give them a couple of keychains, by the way. If we put them up there, you guys got to be in the moment. Where was I at on this one? Sorry. With this, if you have a love of learning and a curiosity, that's right. A few years ago, they were telling everybody needs to be a programmer. Learn how to be a coder because that's what the world is going to need. Well, now you find out, don't worry about being a coder because AI can do all of that. What you want to do, in my opinion, is you seek learning from the best books. You seek learning by study and by faith. And you look for ways that are going to, you have to learn to distinguish yourself. That's what we have to do as a bike company. You know, we have to be able to say, why would somebody want to buy one of our products versus somebody else? And so, you know, in many respects, we all are marketers for ourselves also. You have to be able to, whatever job you take, whatever you are doing, you need to be able to position yourself where you show value to your employer, and also you're doing something that the Lord would be proud of you doing. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you guys very much.